Hi guys, welcome to our next lesson on medieval times. Today we're going to be looking at health and medicine in the medieval period. So the first thing I want you to do today is just a bit of a thinking task. You don't need to write anything down here, I just want you to think back about something we've learned before. So when we looked at ancient Rome, we learned about a man named Galen who had some strange beliefs about health and medicine. Okay, what I want you to try and do is, can you explain to yourself just what this chart opposite means? What's it all about? So we see the yellow bile, black bile, blood, phlegm. Right? And do you remember any of the crazy cures people believed back in the time of ancient Rome? So I'm going to ask you just to pause here for a minute. Think about this chart, and if you can't understand it at all, maybe look back to the ancient Rome booklet and read up on what this chart is about. It's going to be very useful for you to just understand this chart before we get into today's lesson. Okay, so most of you should have a good understanding about this chart, and that what it means is it's looking at the different things that affected what they believe affected the health of people at the time. So Galen, his idea was that the four humors, or the four main liquids of the human body, would have to be in the right balance in order for humans to live a healthy life. And if they were out of balance, this is what led to sickness. So all of the different ailments, all the different diseases and sicknesses were blamed on your four humors, the four liquids, not being in the right proportion in your body. And they would try to change the amount of each liquid in your body in order to help cure you. And it's just good to have this understanding of what health and medicine was in ancient Rome. Has it progressed? Has it changed by the time we reach the medieval period? There is a continuous belief of the four humors for a long period here. So we'll move on. Today what we're looking at is we want to be aware of what medieval society understood about health and medicine, and then also have a good knowledge of the Black Death, which is probably the most famous disease of the medieval times, and definitely something we need to understand, and something we maybe have a bit more empathy for given our current situation, the fact that we're going through a pandemic. But as you'll see, the Black Death was at a whole different scale in terms of how it affected the world. So, the second task for the day, I'm going to be talking to you now about health and medicine in medieval times for about the next 5 to 6 minutes. As I'm talking, what I want you to do is write down 5 pieces of important information about health and medicine in the medieval world. You can go more than 5, but we want at least 5 pieces of important information. So we're listening and we're writing, and obviously feel free to pause if you need to catch up on some writing. So, the first thing we need to understand about health and medicine in medieval times is that they still believe the same thing as what Galen believed to a large extent. They believe in the four humors. So they believe that certain ailments are caused by having too much or too little of each of one of these humors within the body, that these humors are out of balance. And in order to put them back in the right proportion, they had a variety of different techniques. So they might use things such as bloodletting, so let some of your blood out, and they believed that this would bring the four humors back into the right proportions. They could use leeches, so leeching to suck some blood out of you. Okay, they had different methods of using water, so maybe advising drinking more water or abstaining from water. Okay, and there's various other techniques they used in order to keep these four humors in the right balance. So this is quite a primitive understanding, but we know that there is a bit of logic behind this, okay, and there is a thought process behind this. Okay, it's not just made up. Right? They may have got things wrong, but they did think about health and medicine. They were concerned about making sure health was trying to improve. Now, unfortunately, at the time, what would have really helped them would have been if they were allowed to do dissections. And in the later medieval period, some people do start to dissect the bodies of deceased humans. And this is important because it helps them to understand exactly what's going on inside the human body when they can see inside. Now, they do obviously dissect animals when they're cutting them up, and they have a bit of understanding of the inside of mammals, the inside of animals, and that can help them with humans. But in order to have a real understanding of the human internal organs, it is important that they're able to do dissections. Okay, so this would really help them. Unfortunately, people are very, very religious at the time, and the Catholic Church bans dissections. They are not allowed to dissect bodies. It's seen as an unholy thing to do and damaging to the person who lived in the body. So they are not allowed to dissect. Now, some people still do go and do it, and they at times get in quite a lot of trouble for this. Right? But these people who are brave and go out of their way to try and further human knowledge, their work is very, very substantial. Okay, and we'll see this coming up right into the Renaissance period in our next unit, that we'll see that there's medical people at this time also still having to hide the fact that they're doing dissections. But as they do some dissections, they begin to have a better understanding of the human body. Okay. One of the main issues, one of the main health problems for people in medieval times was dental issues. Now, this seems absolutely ludicrous to us today, but they really just did not understand the importance of dental hygiene. Okay, the importance. The people at the time didn't actually brush their teeth. They didn't take care of their dental hygiene, and so a huge amount of the deaths at the time can be brought back to simple dental issues. All right. Simple issues of infections within the gums, things that basic cleaning of the teeth would avoid, were causing people to die at this time. The main way they had of dealing with bad dental hygiene was to pull rotten teeth. Now, they don't have any anesthetic at the time, and they're very little training. So the people, there's a specific career at the time, was called a surgeon barber, or barber surgeon. Sorry, I can't remember it. I'll have to check, sorry. And their job was to pull teeth, essentially. Now, pulling of a tooth may seem like a normal thing for us, but at the time there's no anesthetic, so incredibly painful. There's a lot of blood loss that goes along with it, and if you have an infection or a disease in your gums at the time, this can make things much, much worse and can actually be fatal. So dental hygiene is a huge, huge issue during the medieval period. We also, there are reports that the smell of people's breaths was actually quite disgusting at the time because of this poor dental hygiene, that people had just awful, awful breath. And I've heard reports now, I don't know how accurate this particular nugget of information is, but I have heard reports that the reason why we cover our mouths when we yawn is actually to do with the fact that to do with the stench of people's breaths back in medieval times. This is where the custom came from, that they were trying to block the smell of their breath, breathing it on other people. Okay. The other and final thing we need to understand about the basic health of medieval times was that they didn't understand, just like they didn't understand dental hygiene, they didn't really understand the absolute need for cleanliness, and that being dirty and having dirty surroundings and being surrounded by filth is very, very dangerous to people's health. And so the streets, the people, everything tended to be absolutely filthy. Now, some of the big towns, some of the big cities did have rules about keeping streets clean, but these were rarely enforced. And as we know from the crime and punishment section, there's no police force to make sure that people are following these rules. Yeah. And what often happened was that the streets would be covered in excrement and urine, and people would be walking around in this. People also didn't bathe very often. Even the wealthiest people are known to have only bathed on rare occasions. They would have used different powders and things to try and cover the smell of their bodies, but bathing and cleaning yourself was just not a common thing to do. And so the people were filthy. Right? They had no real proper medical equipment, so they had no things like they had no anesthetics, as we already said. They also had no antiseptics, nothing to kill basic infections. And so if you're living in this world where things are just absolutely filthy, and you get a cut on your arm, a simple little injury can be absolutely devastating, because the infections and the disease that you're surrounded by can get into your blood, into your body. And if your body isn't able to fight it off by itself, then you are in big, big trouble, because there's no real medical help there. Now, there are doctors and wise men and different people who who attempt to do healthcare and attempt to offer cures for these different ailments, but generally these are herbal cures, and while some of them may work on what we call an anecdotal basis, so there's stories that some of them did have success in helping people to be cured of diseases, there was very little actual true knowledge of chemistry or biology that was behind these decisions. It was more coincidental if certain things happened to work to help people. And just like in ancient Rome, we have some crazy, crazy cures at this time. Okay, so the things to be aware of here: they're still believing in the four humors of Galen. They're not allowed to perform dissections due to the rules of the church. Dental hygiene is absolutely atrocious, and dental issues are a big, big source of fatalities, and the place is absolutely filthy. People are living all in very dirty conditions beside animals, with rats and all different animals surrounding them. All this leads up to when we get to a very, very poor situation. Sorry, let's get back. So make sure you've finished that task 2 and you've got those 5 pieces of information written down at this stage. Task 3, we're going to be looking at the Black Death. And the Black Death is the worst epidemic that has ever hit Europe. Right? This is the worst disease that ever arrived on the shores of Europe, and it was absolutely devastating. It is estimated that this one disease killed between 30 and 60% of the people of Europe. Now that is just absolutely that's astounding. If you think about it, at the very least, this killed 1 out of every 3 people. At the most, it killed 2 out of every 3 people. So this was absolutely devastating to the society. Okay? The Black Death is a disease that's carried by rat. It's also known as the bubonic plague, and it arrives in Europe in the early 14th century, so around the 1300s. And it first arrives via boats. Okay, the boats come into port. The rats on the boats have carried this plague with them, and when they land in Europe, they run off the boats and they spread this disease throughout the continent. And you'll see here in this map those red areas, or purple areas of Sardinia there, and Sicily is where it first arrives, and very, very quickly it spreads. So by 1348, you can see all those red areas are starting to experience the bubonic plague or the Black Death. By 1350, it's already spread to all those orange areas. By 1351, 1352, it's right up there in Scandinavia, heading into parts of Russia. So huge, very, very quick spread of a disease. Okay, it spreads rapidly throughout the continent. Right, and now taking into account that people aren't traveling in the same way as they travel nowadays, we know that for us the coronavirus has traveled probably much, much quicker than this. Okay, that's due to the fact that people are traveling quicker. Right, at the time, people aren't traveling as much as they would nowadays. So this is a very, very quick spreading disease. And what this disease causes is people grow huge boils on their body. And when the boils burst, they leave gaping open wounds on the people. And eventually people will die from this. And as I said, huge numbers die, and a very, very painful, horrific death. Okay? And you see some images here there at the bottom of people who are suffering. You see those boils on them. Now, over time, they do come to understand the aspect of contagion, that this is a contagious disease and being around it helps it to spread. And so people who are affected with it, say if someone in your household has it, they will be locked within their house. They'll be told they cannot leave their house, and can be, are under just deep penalties for leaving your house and spreading this disease. And as we said, there's no police force, but the public will enforce this. If you're known to be someone who has the plague in your house, you do not leave, and the people will not allow you to leave. There was a huge, huge issues with trying to contain this disease, and they're not very successful, as you can see by how quickly it spreads. They do understand that also that the bodies of the corpses can still have it and can still spread it. The disease can live on a corpse, on a dead body, and can still spread from it. And so bodies are disposed of very, very quickly, when they've died of the Black Death. There's very little ceremony around it. The bodies simply need to be destroyed. You can see here this final picture in the bottom right corner. This is a plague doctor. And you can see the long beak on his mask, and this is a mask they used in order to try to deal with the plague. And the reports are that the snout was filled with herbs, which would hopefully try to ward off the disease and protect the person inside the mask. So if this doctor was to come and to diagnose someone with the plague, that they would escape without having it. Now, it's a very strange type of mask, but you can also see how it's similar to what we're going through at the moment. The people are being kept within their houses, people are being isolated, and people are wearing masks to avoid disease. So there is a good enough understanding at times of what's going on here, a way of how to avoid spreading diseases. Unfortunately, what they don't figure out is that the lack of cleanliness and the dirt of the area is what allowed the disease to spread in the first place. So they have some understanding, but maybe not quite a good enough understanding. Alright, so basically what I want you to do for the third task, and this is the main task for today, is I want you to read the section in the booklet about the Black Death. And I want 4 to 8 full sentences explaining why the Black Death is considered to be the worst epidemic to ever affect Europe. Okay, and you spend about 10 to 15 minutes doing that task, and that will bring us up to the full lesson. Okay, on Friday we will be doing a quick live lesson just to check in with everyone. Okay, so make sure you're online at the relevant time on Friday, and we'll have a quick Zoom call just to check in on how everyone is doing. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.